UAC 200 Orientation to Human Ecology. Historical perspective. Family and consumer sciences is the study of relationships among individuals, families, and communities, and the social, economic, political, biological, physical, and aesthetic environments in which they function. In the 1990s, Family and Consumer Sciences was named. In 1905, Ellen Swallow Richards, who is considered the founder of this field, used the term euthenics, which was a science that deals with the development of human well-being by the improvement of living conditions, and that's what we still concentrate on. Family and Consumer Sciences, and that is a picture of the journal. The work of family and consumer science professionals has its origin in the perennial, practical problems of daily life. Perennial means occurring and reoccurring, and practical, basic, everyday, and that's a good description of our field. This is one of the graphics that's been used for the field. In 1909, the American Home Economics Association was established after 10 years of work. The purpose of this organization is to improve the living conditions in the home and the institutional home and the community. The institutional home is just areas of group living. And that's a picture from the Cornell Archives. Research had begun in the late 1800s in terms of proper ventilation, heating, safety, water and sewage. The Pure Food and Drug Act was passed in 1906. Catherine Beecher Stowe, the sister of Harriet Beecher Stowe, had valued education for women, and she had called it domestic science. In 1862, the Morrill Act was passed by Congress, and this established land-grant colleges. This provided education for men in terms of farming and agriculture, as well as education for women in running their households. From 1906 to 1917, numerous bills were introduced into Congress to teach vocational education, and in 1917, the Smith-Hughes Act was passed, which provided federal funds for teaching agriculture, home economics, and trades. Significant people in the field: Edward L. Yeomans, who's a chemist. He presented scientific studies concerning the home in the areas of food, air, light, and heat. And Ellen Swallow Richards, who's considered our founder, was a prominent chemist and professor, the first woman to graduate from MIT. And that's her picture. The field is considered both feminist and traditional. It's considered feminist in the strict definition of the word, a theory of political, economic, social equality of the sexes, organized activity on behalf of the rights and interests of women. Home economics is the discipline through which a significant number of women entered academia and scientific research for the first time. In the late 1800s, early 1900s, there were other areas that were starting to open up as well, but this was one of the first areas. Tradition is the transmission of customs or beliefs from generation to generation, a customary or characteristic method or manner. Home economics is considered traditional because it is a discipline which involves the study of very traditional topics: food, clothing, shelter, and human development, and you can't get much more traditional than that. In the 1920s, the Home Economics Association was in search of a logo, and they chose the Betty lamp as its logo, and it's still used today in different variations. They had a contest, and the winning design was submitted by Mildred Chamberlain from Chicago. She submitted the Betty lamp because that lamp in colonial days had provided light for all household industries. It was an improvement on candlelight because the oil light would last longer. She chose the Betty lamp as the appreciation of beauty, the spirit of joy, the power of strength, the blessing of fellowship, the value of service, and the bond of cooperation. In 1925, New York State College of Home Economics was established at Cornell. The 1930s brought the Great Depression, and home economists offered their skill and knowledge to help families cope with the drastic changes in their lifestyles during the Depression era. A well-fed America is a strong America, and victory gardens continued. George Washington Carver had suggested these, and during World War I, victory gardens were created into the 30s and then continued into the 40s and World War II. In 1930, the first PhD in home economics was awarded at Cornell to Helen Cannon. The Fair Labor Standards Act was passed in the 1930s, which established the 40-hour work week and 8-hour workday, and home economists were active in helping to get that passed. During the 1940s was World War II. Throughout World War II, home economists assisted the war effort and worked to preserve the social gains that the war had threatened. In 1945, the Fair Labor Standards Act finally was enacted, and limitations were set on working hours and child labor. They also worked on school lunch programs and consumer goods. And in 1946, home economics education became a department at Cornell. In the 1950s, home economists reached out to other cultures and became more global. The Ghana Project was established to assist women's education in Africa, and they wanted to foster international understanding. And the stereotype of home economics developed of just sewing and cooking, and we all know that it's a lot more than that. In the 1960s, it was a time of great social upheaval, and home economists focused their skills and knowledge on solving social issues, including hunger, equal rights, racism, drug abuse, and violence, topics that we're still working on today. In 1966, Project Head Start was established with First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, and home economists worked with her. In the 1960s, home economics was looked at as a single field with a broad general perspective and a number of subspecialties. It was a unified field, and people who graduated in home economics were considered generalists. They knew a little bit about a lot of things. In the 1970s, home economics recognized an increasing number of changes in the American family and looked at those issues. The issue of dual career families, who will mind the children? They were concerned with daycare standards, and in the 1970s, 1979, the definition of home economics as a critical science was established, and specialists started happening as we have those areas today. In the 1980s, the home economics field established its relationship to the role of women and addressed issues such as quality daycare and female-headed households. That is a poster from their annual meeting in the 1980s. In the 1990s, the American Home Economics Association changes its name to the American Association of Family and Consumer Sciences to reflect the change and scope of the field. And part of this came about because of the Scottsdale Convention, which examined the mission, the breadth, the scope, and the name, as well as recommended a new conceptual framework. Family and consumer science professionals focused on balancing work and family. Family and consumer sciences, as a name, better describes the integrated approach that we use to empower individuals, families, and communities in which individuals and families function. In 1999, the American Association of Family and Consumer Sciences celebrated 90 years and entered the new millennial as a source and voice for strong families, and they were looking at trends that affected the families, such as the aging of the population, digital technology, genetically modified products, protecting the environment, the fact that there would be no ethnic majority by 2020, which is where we are today, and work life and globalization, topics we're still studying. Home economics professionals have designed and facilitated government programs to improve public welfare in a number of arenas. They have changed policies affecting women, children, and families. And they have offered a greater understanding of nutrition, food equipment and food storage, stain removal, synthetic fibers, more efficient household designs, and improved consumer practices. What are some of our current concerns? What are some of the perennial practical problems that are facing us today? Affordable health care, elder care, daycare, food safety, public safety, diabetes, obesity, just to name a few. The field has a rich heritage and a promising professional future. The field of human ecology is specialized areas across many practice areas and content specialties.